Generally, parents expect that their care for their children will be reciprocated in the future. In the effort to protect their child from mistakes, however, a dangerous boundary can be crossed, a boundary whose crossing can result in a terrible death. On the morning of March 15, 2015, near South Whitehall, Pennsylvania, USA, a police patrol noticed a suspicious Ford Freestyle partially submerged in a pond. The officers decided to conduct a standard check. As they shone flashlights into the interior, they saw several suspicious stains that resembled blood. The doors were not locked. When they opened them, they detected a strong smell of cleaning agents. Although the interior had obviously been cleaned, it showed blood traces. The vehicle belonged to a woman named Cheryl Silvonek. One of the officers noticed a disturbed layer of earth on the side under which a corpse emerged. The medical examiner confirmed that the deceased was Cheryl. The stab wounds extended over the entire upper body, but 5 stabs to the neck were fatal. It was a brutal attack. The victim's skull was bruised and hematomas were evident. She had been beaten for a long time before being killed with a weapon. The bleeding in her eyes and the broken bone in her neck indicated that she had been restrained. Cheryl fought desperately, as the numerous defensive injuries on her arms showed. Due to the degree of rigor mortis, the medical examiner determined that she had died several hours before the police arrived. The vehicle was partially flooded. Apparently, the perpetrator wanted to dispose of it by drowning it along with the corpse. However, this was not possible as the slope was unstable, and the vehicle simply got stuck in the mud. It seemed the perpetrator was confused and decided to bury the victim and leave the car, but this obviously did not help conceal the murder. Given the extent of the brutality, investigators immediately suspected a personal motive for the attack. The alleged perpetrator was to be sought in the immediate vicinity of the woman. When investigators arrived at Cheryl's address to inform her relatives of the discovery, they found her husband in the house, who had slept through the night and did not even realize that something terrible had happened to his wife. Also living in the house was their 14-year-old daughter, who was at that time with a 20-year-old man. The young man and the deceased's husband were immediately suspected, but the truth was even more shocking. The murdered woman was a married mother of 2 children. The husband's name was David. They had lived for 24 years in the small town of Appomattox in Pennsylvania. The family was a respected family in the area. They had similar professions. The man was a pharmacist and worked at the local pharmacy. Cheryl was an employee at the town's hospital. The couple's firstborn child was a boy who was already attending college at the time of the described events, and in 2001, a daughter was born, named Jamie. She became a real daddy's girl. The relationship with her father was from the beginning even better than with her mother. They were very close and even had a penchant for the same activities. The father and his daughter often went fishing and hunting. Both loved motorcycles. When Jamie started school, she integrated without problems into the new group. The girl was sociable and learned well. In her teenage years, a rebellious phase began, leading to frequent conflicts within the family. In particular, Jamie had many problems with her mother. All this reached a critical point at the end of 2014. During this time, the student increasingly withdrew, communicated less and less with family members, even with her father, with whom she had had a trusting and understanding relationship from the start. Jamie began regularly running away from home, refusing to say where and with whom she was spending time. All this happened with enviable regularity. Her grades at school got worse and worse. The rebellious girl even insisted on moving into a rented apartment with her friends, where she lived for several months. It was only with difficulty that the parents managed to persuade their daughter to return home. Until March 2015, Cheryl had no idea what was going on, until she finally managed to find out the reason for her daughter's sudden mood swing and behavior. As it turned out, at the time she moved in with her friends, she was already in a relationship with a man 6 years her senior. At such an age, this difference is quite significant. When the mother found out, she was naturally shocked. She knew exactly that an 8th grade student cannot be of sound mind when dating an adult man. During family confrontations, Cheryl discovered that her daughter had fallen in love with a soldier stationed in a unit in Maryland. His name was Caleb Barnes. It turned out that the young people had known each other long before these events. When Jamie was 13 years old, she attended a rock festival with friends. At the event, she met Caleb through a mutual acquaintance. The young man immediately took a liking to her. Jamie decided to enter into a relationship with him. To this end, the girl, who looked much older than she was, posed as a 17-year-old. The man then agreed to exchange numbers, and thus their communication began with the lies of a schoolgirl. They used social networks and SMS for their correspondence, often called each other, and met whenever Caleb was in town. During this time, the relationship with her family began to deteriorate, as the girl was greatly afraid of being exposed. In this case, her mother and father would naturally not allow her to communicate with an older man. However, it only happened a year later, as the young people's relationship strengthened. In early May 2015, Cheryl revealed her daughter. She had seen the secret correspondence that Jamie was conducting with Caleb. The woman now knew that they were meeting regularly. In an attempt to find out with whom the schoolgirl had established a relationship, the mother quickly discovered that it was an adult friend, and she did not like it at all. When her daughter found out that they had been exposed, she tried to lie to her mother and claimed that Caleb was only 16 years old. But Cheryl knew that he was in the military, which meant he could not be younger than 18. When the woman found out the truth about the young man's age, she was shocked about what Jamie had gotten herself into. She contacted the 20-year-old Caleb himself to talk to him. He confessed that he was convinced Jamie was 17 and would soon be 18. When Cheryl told him the truth, he pretended to be shocked, but in reality, he had known for a long time. After several months of their relationship, Jamie confessed to him her real age, and Caleb agreed to continue their affair but insisted on keeping it secret from adults. Cheryl had no idea about his deception. Caleb explained to the young man that he had to meet with a minor and therefore had to go to jail, pretending to agree to her demands. He even called Jamie and announced to her mother that they would break up. But it turned out that everything was a lie. The lovers continued their relationship but kept it even more hidden. About a week before the murder, Cheryl caught the couple in the basement of her house in bed. The woman was angry, threw Caleb out, and threatened to report him to the police because he had an intimate relationship with a minor. The exact content of this conversation could not be determined. It was probably the same episode where the mother tried to convince the older friend to end contact with the schoolgirl. She was not aware of how far things had already progressed and that her daughter was pregnant. Immediately afterward, Caleb called Jamie, and only 2 days after this conversation, the corpse was found. In the hands of the police was the corpse of a woman who tried to protect her daughter. Could two lovers have planned a brutal murder to eliminate obstacles to their happiness? Of course, they could have, as such stories are not unusual. After the police officers learned about this teenage relationship, Caleb became the main suspect in the murder case, but Jamie was also under suspicion. When investigators first arrived at Cheryl's house, they noticed scratches on the girl, which raised the suspicion that she was involved in the crime. This suspicion was only strengthened when the police met Caleb and also noticed a severe cut on his right arm. Suspicion against the young couple grew, and the investigators continued to gather information about them. In the days before the tragedy, Jamie had begged her mother to let her go to a festival in the neighboring town of Scranton. She insisted on going alone, but her mother was naturally against it because it could be dangerous. Moreover, the woman was sure that it was just an excuse to see Caleb again. The investigators analyzed all the correspondence between the young couple and Cheryl. In one of the correspondences on this topic, when the schoolgirl was in class, the mother wrote that she would not allow this relationship under any circumstances as long as the girl was a minor. Jamie assured her mother that she would go to the festival with her friends and that Caleb would not be there. The daughter tried to manipulate and threatened with a nervous breakdown or another outburst at home. Finally, she managed to get her way. The mother conceded and even agreed to take her daughter with her boyfriend. Cheryl wanted to use this trip for educational purposes to set all the fine points in young people's relationships. Immediately after the mother had given her an ultimatum, the student was angry and sent her boyfriend an SMS in which she expressed her wish for her mother to disappear forever. He laughed and agreed that this would solve all problems. From this communication, it emerged that Jamie was expecting a baby. She responded to her mother that she understood the proposal. They agreed that the woman would take the couple to a concert in a neighboring town on the evening after school. Then the girl turned to her boyfriend again, and between the two of them, there was a disturbing exchange of messages reminiscent of discussing a crime plan. Cheryl should drive the young people in a car because she did not feel like attending the event. The woman should drive off on her own and then wait in the car at the end of the festival. All three should then drive back home. The plan was that Jamie would massacre her own mother at this point. After reviewing these reports, law enforcement was sure that it was a case of two murderers. Now they had to prove it. After examining the victim's car, it was clear from the numerous blood splatters that the attack had taken place as indicated in the passenger compartment. She was beaten, strangled, and treated with numerous knife wounds, causing her to die from blood loss within minutes. According to reports, the two perpetrators then calmly went to a fast food restaurant where they ate. They then went to a nearby store where they bought cleaning agents, a lot of bleach, and latex gloves. Apparently, all this was necessary to cover up the evidence. The young people were recorded by the store's surveillance cameras. When law enforcement officers saw the footage, they were shocked. It seemed as if the schoolgirl was happier than ever and glad that her mother was no longer alive. Jamie had no remorse for the act, but was rather happy that she could now date her older friend without hindrance. Jamie and her friend returned to the crime scene and tried to clean the inside of the car, but it was not so easy that they eventually had to abandon the task. They pushed the car into a pond. It did not sink, so they had to pull out the corpse and bury it. According to the correspondence, the couple had originally planned to flee to another state but then abandoned this idea because they would automatically become the main suspects. But that did not help them at all on the night of the murder. Jamie's father, named David, was not suspected. The man had sleep problems and took sleeping pills to sleep. Since he was not expecting anyone and could rest, David slept through the night and did not realize that his wife had been murdered by her own daughter. The man learned about the massacre on March 15 when Cheryl's corpse was found and identified by a patrol. He had no idea that he could himself have been a victim of the perpetrators. Caleb and Jamie were arrested and charged with murder and evidence tampering. Initially, it was assumed that the attacker was a soldier. It was thought that a daughter would hardly be able to handle an adult. But the man had no defensive wounds on his face or body, only a cut on his arm. As it turned out, he was sitting in the back seat, making it harder for him to hit the victim's neck. According to the medical examiner, Cheryl was hit from the right side. The image matched the wounds inflicted by the passenger in the passenger seat where the victim's daughter, Jamie, was sitting. The girl had a broken fingernail, and all her hands and face were heavily scratched. Obviously, the friend could have played a much smaller role in the attack than investigators had initially assumed, and Jamie had played a larger role in the murder. All these questions could only be clarified through interrogations. In his conversations with the police officers, Caleb made confusing and contradictory statements. Initially, the friend stated that he did not know what could have happened to Cheryl, but when investigators revealed what they knew about their joint trip, Caleb changed his story. He now admitted that all three were indeed at the festival, and that Cheryl then picked them up in her car and drove them home. Caleb was supposedly dropped off in front of his house. He did not notice anything suspicious and simply went to bed. He did not realize that a trip to the festival could end with a murder. He believed that his girlfriend would not commit such a thing. So everything was done by a stranger. Caleb insisted on his innocence and clearly covered the girl. Then, when he found out that their correspondence with Jamie had been uncovered, he began to shift all responsibility for the crime onto her. He said he had left Jamie and her mother in the car and went for a walk, and when he returned, he found the lifeless body of the woman and his girlfriend covered in blood. He claimed he had helped dispose of the corpse but was not involved in the crime himself. Jamie also initially claimed she had no idea who could have killed her mother, but her story changed several times during the interrogation. The student reported that her mother had driven her to Caleb and then left. During the interrogations, the girl cried a lot and said that she loved her mother very much, but it all turned out to be a lie. Given the collected evidence, it was obvious that she was the one who had stabbed her mother. At the time of her arrest, Jamie had not even had time to heal the injuries she had sustained during the fight, which was a clear indication of her guilt. But she refused to admit her involvement and simply made up various excuses. At the crime scene, a knife was found about 10 meters from the corpse of the murdered woman, which had been thrown away. It was the murder weapon. The forensic technicians found the DNA of 2 people on the blade, Cheryl's blood on the blade and Jamie's fingerprints on the handle. This confirmed that the daughter had inflicted the wounds and had become the executioner of her own mother. According to the prosecution, the woman wanted to use the trip to the festival to approach the young people and calmly talk about their relationship. She wanted to make things right and protect her daughter from the mistakes of her youth, not realizing that she was already sentenced to death at that moment. The investigators continued to examine the content of the couple's phones in custody. As expected, Jamie, the initiator of the events, was even more involved. The girl was not willing to stop there. In one of the dialogues, she insisted that it was worth getting rid of not only her mother, but also her father, who was also against their relationship and would hinder her happiness. Without knowing it herself, Jamie's beloved father was in deadly danger of being at the mercy of his own daughter. He learned about the planned plot, although he was also on the victim list, but the father refused to believe it. The man tried until the end to defend his daughter. He especially criticized the U.S. law enforcement and justice system because Jamie was to be tried as an adult criminal. The father believed that his daughter, even if she was involved in the murder, due to her age, did not know what she was doing. He insisted on a specialized juvenile detention center, as this would allow for the girl's future rehabilitation. Since his persuasion did not bear fruit with the police officers, he insisted that Jamie needed a psychiatric evaluation because she might be suffering from mental issues. The examination was conducted, and the experts found that Jamie was healthy. Again, the father criticized the media, which he believed had turned his daughter into a real monster. The man emphasized that she could neither be the ringleader nor the organizer of the murder. In his opinion, the guilt clearly lay with Caleb. Despite the father's efforts, his plan did not work, and all appeals were rejected. Jamie was to be tried as an adult in court. Had the father's efforts succeeded, she would have been placed in a juvenile detention center until she turned 21 and then released. Now she was facing a life sentence. It was decided to conduct separate proceedings for each of the accused in this case. The forensic expert who attended the trial provided an official report on the main circumstances of Cheryl's death. According to the expert, the massacre of the woman lasted about 20 minutes before she showed no signs of life. The woman lost consciousness due to her injuries and then died from blood loss. However, it was extremely difficult to determine exactly what role the 2 young people played in this execution. Obviously, the knife was in Jamie's hands, but Caleb probably was not excluded. Presumably, he helped his girlfriend by holding the victim from behind and probably strangled her, but no traces of his DNA were found on the victim's body. Also, despite the cut on his hand, it was assumed that he might have acted cautiously. The student and her friend still refused to confess or talk about the events in the car. An important witness for the prosecution was Jamie's best friend. A week before the murder, she had been in contact with the accused. Jamie told her about her worries. She believed that her mother did not understand her, and the girl was afraid of losing her friend. Jamie even said that she had planned the murder of her own mother together with Caleb, and was worried about the success of this plan. According to Jamie, they had initially decided that Caleb should reprimand Cheryl. Considering his age, this was risky, because the young man would certainly go to prison for the rest of his life, if caught. After a discussion, it was decided that the knife should be placed in the hands of the victim's daughter. The young criminals were sure that this would allow her to escape punishment due to the girl's young age. She would simply get away with it. Unfortunately, the friend simply did not believe these words and did not go to the police. When there was another conversation with the friend, the couple was just in the process of selecting a way to retaliate. The friend did not believe her ears, so she asked again. Apparently embarrassed, Jamie replied that she had only made a bad joke so that the friend was not alarmed. Later, shocking new details emerged. At least 4 people in the neighborhood of the Cream family heard a broken car horn around 1 a.m. At that time, Cheryl's car was parked in the driveway in front of the house. For 20 minutes, a suspicious noise could be heard from the vehicle, then it stopped, and the car immediately drove away. Thanks to the statements of these witnesses, investigators were able to reconstruct the alleged brutal murder more accurately. The timing matched the report of the medical examiner. It turned out that the woman was not killed near the pond where the corpse was buried, and the car was abandoned but directly in front of her own house. Unfortunately, none of the neighbors were vigilant and did not scare off the criminals. At that time, the family's father was sleeping deeply under the influence of sleeping pills, so that he could not hear anything or help his wife, but that saved his life. As Cheryl stopped breathing, the 14-year-old daughter and the 20-year-old friend drove away and placed the corpse in the back seat. Their plan to drown the car with the corpse did not work, so they had to get away. They dug out the corpse and disposed of the car there. After that, the bloodthirsty couple, as if nothing had happened, went to a fast food restaurant where they ate calmly. After a trip to the supermarket to buy cleaning agents, the couple returned to the car but were overwhelmed by this mission as well. After a quick cleaning of the interior, they fled. If the vehicle had not gotten stuck in the mud, events could have unfolded very differently. The corpse would have been sought for a long time, and perhaps Jamie's father would have lost his life as well. After another meeting with the prosecution before the trial, Jamie decided to plead guilty to first-degree murder, criminal conspiracy, and evidence manipulation. In fact, there was enough evidence against the girl, and it made no sense to deny it. According to the student, the motive was Cheryl's prohibition of communication and meetings with her friend. Naturally, the woman wanted the best for her daughter, but she signed her own death sentence when she threatened to go to the police if Caleb did not leave her alone. Jamie was afraid that Caleb would go to jail if Cheryl found out that she was pregnant. Eventually, the young people decided that murder was the only way out. After she confessed, the 14-year-old Jamie was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 35 years in prison. She will have the opportunity to leave prison at the age of 49, making her only 5 years younger than her own mother, whose life was brutally cut short. Now the trial against Caleb was next. The charges included child abuse, murder, and attempting to confuse the investigations. His lawyer decided to take advantage of the verdict already imposed on Jamie. In this way, Caleb silently shifted the responsibility for the murder onto the girl and declared himself willing to take responsibility for complicity and hiding the corpse. Another important trump for the defense was the fact that the girl was pregnant. According to him, the mother had caught them having sex in the car and had freaked out. The man knew that Jamie was pregnant with his child, so when a scuffle broke out between the women, he tried to protect his child's mother. He justified the presence of wounds on his own hands as he tried to separate the women, cutting Jamie himself accidentally with a knife, but then withdrawing the blow and killing no one. Throughout the trial, Caleb remained calm and even often smiled as he told his story. This version differed significantly from what the investigators had heard during the initial interrogations. The actual picture of the events that took place in the car still raises questions, as no traces of Caleb's DNA were found on the murder weapon or on Cheryl's corpse. The prosecution relied on a single accusation that indicated the young man's involvement in the murder of the woman. From the correspondence with Jamie, it emerged that Caleb also wanted her mother's death, mainly because he feared the woman would go to the police. In his case, the friend had a strong motive. At this point, the teenagers already knew that the girl was pregnant, which only worsened the situation. As evidence, the correspondence of the couple was presented to the jurors, especially Caleb's message, "I chose the knife," which demonstrated the seriousness of his intentions. These arguments proved to be convincing. Caleb Barnes was found guilty on all counts, including first-degree murder, hiding a corpse, and seducing a minor. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole plus 44 years for the other charges. In 203, the case changed again. Now, Jamie's lawyer applied for a retrial. The defense accused the law enforcement authorities of inadequate investigations, as the investigators had overlooked evidence in defense of the young criminal. It was assumed that Jamie, due to her unstable condition at the time of the act, had been influenced by her delicate situation. Now, a new version of events emerged. According to Jamie, Caleb was the mastermind behind the murder. He was the one who instigated the girl to commit the murder. The defendant insisted that the friend was a strong manipulator, but had long resisted being persuaded. Then he resorted to physical violence, insisting that she became a victim of the friend who literally forced her to stab her mother. According to the defense, this sounded convincing because it involved an inexperienced 14-year-old student who got involved with a 20-year-old man, and even became pregnant by him. Given the circumstances, the girl could indeed have been driven and influenced by her friend. Now that he was in prison, she wanted to seek justice. But her new story is contradicted by the correspondence with the friend in which the girl herself actively insisted on the necessity of getting rid of her mother. There is still no final decision on the revision of these cases. In any case, Jamie became the youngest girl convicted in Lehigh County. Thank you for watching and take care of yourself.